The Elements of Non-Euclidean Geometry by D.M.Y. Sommerville.
Chapter 1, Historical. Section 11, Schweikart, Taurinus, and Wachter. Among the contemporaries and pupils of Gauss, there are three names which deserve mention. F.K. Schweikart, 1780 to 1859, professor of law in Marburg, sent to Gauss in 1818 a page of manuscript explaining a system of geometry which he called astral geometry, in which the sum of the angles of a triangle is always less than two right angles, and in which there is an absolute unit of length. He did not publish any account of his researches, but he induced his nephew, F.A. Taurinus, 1794 to 1874, to take up the question. His uncle's ideas did not appeal to him, however, but a few years later he attempted a treatment of the theory of parallels, and having received some encouragement from Gauss, he published a small book, Theory of Parallels, in 1825. After its publication, he came across Kammerer's new edition of Euclid in Greek and Latin, which, in an excursus to Euclid 129, contains a very valuable history of the theory of parallels, and there he found that his methods had been anticipated by Schweikart and Lambert. Next year, accordingly, he published another work, Geometry Prima Elementa, and in the appendix to this he works out some of the most important trigonometrical formulae for the non-Euclidean geometry by using the fundamental formulae of spherical geometry with an imaginary radius. Instead of the notation of hyperbolic functions, which was then scarcely in use, he expressed his results in terms of logarithms and exponentials, and calls his geometry the logarithmic spherical geometry. Although Taurinus must be regarded as an independent discoverer of non-Euclidean trigonometry, he always retained the belief, unlike Gauss and Schweikart, that Euclidean geometry was necessarily the true one. Taurinus himself was aware, however, of the importance of his contributions to the theory of parallels, and it was a bitter disappointment to him when he found that his work attracted no attention. In disgust, he burned the remainder of the edition of his Elementa, which is now one of the rarest of books. The third to be mentioned, as having arrived at the notion of a geometry in which Euclid's postulate is denied, is F.L. Wachter, 1792 to 1817, a student under Gauss. It is remarkable that he affirms that even if the postulate is denied, the geometry of a sphere becomes identical with the geometry of Euclid when the radius is indefinitely increased, though it is distinctly shown that the limiting surface is not a plane. This was one of the greatest discoveries of Lobachevsky and Bolyai. If Wachter had lived, he might have been the discoverer of non-Euclidean geometry, for his insight into the question was far beyond that of the ordinary parallel postulate demonstrator.
The Elements of Non-Euclidean Geometry. This book was written by D.M.Y. Sommerville, M.A. and Doctor of Science. It was published by the Open Court Publishing Company, London, G. Bell & Sons, Ltd. in 1919, and now is in the public domain. It is being read by Jim Renholt, with programming and illustrations by Jim Renholt in 2019. Thank you for listening.